Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor. The High Strangeness Factor is where we explore all aspects of the paranormal. To seek out the truth, we balance true skepticism with an open-minded approach to that which lies hidden and is as yet unexplained. I'm happy to say that as it says on the banner, my occasional co-host, Andy Mercer, is back tonight. Andy, welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, the once in a blue moon.
Yes.
Co-host occasionally pops up when he's got 5 minutes spare. But yes, I am here tonight. It's good to be back with you, Steve. It's been a little while. We did a show a few weeks back, which was really good. Really enjoyed it. But I've had a lot been going on here at the moment, so I've been rather tied up. I'm trying to finish my latest book, which is supposed to have been finished about 6 months ago. And just when I think it's done, I think, oh no, I need to add that. Oh no, I need to add that. Oh, I better change that. Can go on forever. But thankfully, I actually realised I'd missed a whole section out that I thought I'd done and hadn't. So it's quite a relief to discover that. I've got more time to work on it. But that's kept me really busy of late. So that's why I've not been around an awful lot.
And the name of your book?
This is it gets complicated. It's all that sort of dark, mysterious stuff. It's all about the dark side of the Kabbalah. So it's taken longer than I planned, but it's really been quite a project that I'm enjoying working on. So, and I say it's nearly finished, but not quite.
Well, as you know, I'm also working on a book, slowly but surely. I'm with a real. My co-author is a real writer, and our book should be called "Parallels and Patterns: A New Paradigm for the Study of Paranormal Phenomena." I know that's a lot of P's. We're going to call it Peter Piper picked a peck. Well, that's been used, so we won't use that. But
no.
But it has to do with all the the connections and the stuff that I talk about all the time. John Keel, Jacques Vallée, and the strange patterns that seem to connect between folklore and modern-day UFO experiences and so forth.
Yeah.
But shall we introduce? People heard a lady say something, react to your book title. So there actually is somebody here that we're going to introduce. Kim Poeppey is a lifetime Fortean. She's a researcher and investigator and has had paranormal experiences all her life. From ghostly experiences to an encounter with the dogman when she was 7 years old, Kim is qualified to speak with authority on matters of the unknown. Kim has appeared on an episode of Monster Quest with Linda Godfrey, where they explored Kim's dogman encounter using hypnosis and a lie detector. Kim has met John Keel, served on a panel with him, and has investigated reports of the infamous Chicago Mothman with researcher Allison Jornlin. Kim has also spoken at various venues on paranormal subjects, including last year's Mothman Festival. Kim, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So was that a good enough introduction? Did I make up too much, or was it pretty close?
That sounded pretty good. I'm kind of surprised. I've done all that.
Well, you've done more, but we had to shorten it a bit so we could get to it. So now I know that you've had a lifetime of experiences, and it seems to me that lately you've been posting on Facebook some various, what should we say, ghostly encounters you had growing up?
Yes.
Yes. Well, why don't we start by, is that what brought you into your interest of the paranormal, you being an experiencer?
No. Yes. but not the ghosts.
Okay.
Seeing the dogmen was what got me involved in the paranormal. I didn't think anything about the ghosts was unusual or abnormal or weird, and I started experiencing that at about the same time that I saw the dogman. But that's not what got me interested in the paranormal. The dogman was.
Okay, but were you a little girl when you started having these experiences?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about, and you say they were kind of natural. You didn't know, like a lot of people pick up on psychic intuition, vibrations, or whatever, and they just think it's normal. Was that kind of your case?
Right. It was normal. Almost everyone in my family experienced something at one time or the other, and they talked freely about it. It was never considered a faux pas or something to be afraid of or something weird.
Now, see, that would have scared the hell out of me. I had no experiences, but I was terrified of going to the basement, like a lot of kids, I guess. So,
okay.
Well, I guess we can talk about some of those. We can jump all over the place, but I know I've heard you talk about this dogman encounter, and that the thing was, it was right in the heart of the city, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it was on 50th and Wright in the Sherman Park neighborhood of the city of Milwaukee.
Well, I have no idea about what happened, so please, I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat. What did you experience? What did you see?
Okay, I was about 7. I believe that's first grade, and we had just moved into what's considered a Milwaukee bungalow in Milwaukee. It had 3 bedrooms. It had an upstairs and a downstairs, a big backyard. It had a front yard. I was in the backyard with my mom, and I think we had a swing set. And my mom and I heard yelling, a woman yelling. I do not know where my father and my brother were, but they weren't with us. Back in the 1970s, when you heard yelling, you went and you looked to see what it was. And we walked to the front yard from the backyard, and we saw the lady in the corner house across the street from us. And I might point out that we were second house from the corner. So it would have been straight in front of us and to the right, that house on the corner. And we saw the lady, and she had her little kid. I think it was a girl. And she was protecting the little kid, kind of hunching over on her porch. And she lived in a duplex, which is an upstairs and the downstairs apartments. And she was yelling, "Go away, help." And there was a creature walking across her front yard. And I could point out now that neighbors from all over the block were out to see who was yelling. Many people saw this, at least 10 or 12 that I recall, but there could have been more. The creature was about the same height as the railing on her porch, so an estimation would be 4 feet tall. And it walked on 2 legs. It had a snout, it had pointy ears, and it had kind of a bushy tail, and it was grayish color to me. And it walked across the lady's front lawn and took a turn around the corner of the house and went out of our view east on Wright Street.
It was on 2 legs the whole time?
Yes.
And about how tall was it roughly?
4 feet.
4 feet.
Wow.
Did it look like it could have been a conventional dog? I mean, pretty strange for a dog to run on its hind legs that long, but is there any remote chance it could have been something normal that was just acting abnormally, or do you think there was something distinctly different about it?
Interesting you should say that. My mother told me many years later as an adult that she and all of the other adults who had witnessed the sighting had all agreed that it was a dog with rabies and they would never, ever bring it up again. My mother said they didn't know what it was. It was easier to explain it away as something natural and forget about it. But she always called it that dog thing. As an adult, or as a youth becoming an adult, I convinced myself I had seen someone's escaped pet baboon. But as we know, baboons don't have long bushy tails.
Right.
Not normal, no.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's for sure.
Right.
Now, of course, let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think I first heard Linda Godfrey. Now, of course, Linda Godfrey wrote the Beast of Bray Road and several other books on the Dog Man and other cryptids. Great lady, great researcher, and a very, very rational researcher that balances, skepticism and open-mindedness. And I remember hearing her years ago on a radio show talking about this book, The Beast of Bray Road, when it first came out. And I'd heard one other report separate from that years before, kind of the same thing. When was it that you became aware of either Linda's work or the more modern view of the Dog Man? And when did you connect the two together? Your experience with, let's say, Linda's research.
Before Linda had written her book, investigator Lauren Coleman had written a book, and he had a chapter in one of his books about devil monkeys in the United States. Hunters, people walking through the woods, had sometimes seen something similar to what they thought was a monkey. And it was smaller, maybe 2-3 feet tall, and it was often in the trees. So after I had read that book, I thought, well, maybe I had seen a devil monkey. In about 2001, a mutual friend of mine and Linda's hooked us up together and told me his friend Linda was writing this book, and he thought my sighting, which I told everybody about, would be perfect for her to hear. So she called me one day, and we spent a couple hours, 2.5, maybe 3, on the phone talking about it, and we hooked up, and we've been friends ever since. She is an awesome, awesome lady. Apparently, mine was one of the first daytime sightings to come forward that she learned about.
And also kind of unique that it was right in the heart of a major city.
It was, right. But 50th and Wright in Milwaukee is kind of in the middle of 4 rivers, or a stream and 3 rivers. They're not very big. They get bigger, they get smaller, and it's within a mile in every direction.
There seems to be something about the confluence of rivers because I met you, Kim, at the Dogman Symposium a few years ago in Decatur, Ohio. Decatur? No. Defiance, Ohio.
Defiance, yes.
Yes. And they have the confluence of 2 rivers, the Maumee, and I don't remember the other one. But, and of course, Point Pleasant with its Mothman has the Ohio and the Kanawha. That's kind of interesting. It may not be a real connection, but interesting nonetheless. Boy, I didn't know that you'd known Linda that long. So anyway, what year was it about that you? How did you get hooked up with the Monster Quest episode? I know Linda has done 2 of them, but
yes, Linda got me to do the Monster Quest episode.
And we can tell this is.
What's going on over there?
What? It wasn't on your side?
No.
But Andy and I are going to blame you.
What was that?
Did you hear?
What was that?
I don't know. It wasn't here.
I actually mute my mic when I'm not talking, so it wouldn't have been me.
I'll be darned.
It wasn't me.
I didn't drop anything as far as okay.
Sinister forces. What did you hear? I heard something.
Like something fell or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought,
yep.
Kim, get it together, man. You're making a lot of noise.
That dog man is listening.
Right? Well, that's a funny thing you should say that. Whenever you get too deep into the unexplained, things that humans aren't supposed to know about, the powers that be intervene and let you know that they hear you and they're watching you.
Well, it's interesting because Nick Redfern has said that there are certain subjects that he talks about that always cause problems. And they are when he talks about the Men in Black and the black-eyed children. He'll start getting, static and electrical problems and so forth. So I would have thought we would have been safe with just a mangy dog man,
I'm waiting for something to fall here. I really am. I'm watching the room and I'm waiting for something to fall off a shelf or fall off a wall. That would be normal.
Speaking of which, when I was reviewing the opening of Linda's book, The Beast of Bray Road, when she talked to, I think it was Lori Andrezzi, one of the original sightings of the dog man on Bray Road. By the way, I took a hike on Bray Road, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that, Kim, because you said you picked up vibes there before. But anyway.
Right, yes.
This Lori Andrezzi was talking to an animal control officer, talking about this crazy thing she'd seen. This thing was on, kneeled like a man, but it had a head like a dog. It was eating some kind of roadkill. And so they were trying to come to grips with what this could be. And she said that they started discussing perhaps it has to do with some kind of a cult. Well, at that moment, several books flew out of the shelf that right next to them. I mean, nobody pushed them. Nobody slammed a door where they could have fallen out. And so there does seem to be these paranormal trappings that surround these things.
Sure.
But I guess since I brought up Bray Road, Andy, Bray Road is just east of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin. And I became intrigued by it. Now, it's a pretty non-threatening looking road. I actually, you don't want to park your car on it because they'll tow it probably. I mean, there's not much of a shoulder. It's out in the country. And if they see a car parked there, they're just going to figure it has broken down and they're going to take it to the wrecker or something. So I had to park a half mile away in a little shopping center. And I walked to it. I only walked in about a mile and a half and came back because, it was, I didn't actually have my, I had been kind of inactive most of the winter, and I didn't really have my hiking legs yet. So, but it was kind of an interesting excursion. But Kim, you said that you had been on that road, and you really sort of picked up something, I think.
Right. My husband and I went for a drive down that road, middle of the afternoon on a Sunday, I think it was. And it wasn't too cold out. It was maybe like 60s. And you definitely get the feeling almost that you're in like a valley, that you're down lower for some reason. And as you're driving, like there were cornfields on each side for a while. My husband, Steven, saw something run across the road. And we were very excited about it. The likelihood is very good. It was a farm cat or a coyote. It never fails. You only see the rear end of this animal as it's shooting into the corn, right?
Right.
But it made us think there could very easily be something bigger on either side of you, and you would never see it. The corn comes really close to the road. As we were driving, though, you could see how you could easily get turned around. You felt funny. There was something funny about it. You felt almost like you were in a valley, and you had walls on either side of you. It was you definitely felt it. It was strange. It's hard to explain. You'd have to experience it yourself.
Was it daytime?
It was daytime.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you ever been out there at night?
I was out there one time with Linda. Yes.
Yeah, I went out there solo one night just because I wanted to get a picture of the Bray Road sign lit up. So here I am, this idiot, parked on the side of the road, waiting for the cars to go by. There are not a lot of cars, but still, they kept showing up. And so I was trying to aim a flashlight at Bray Road and take a clear picture at the same time. So I looked like a real idiot to anybody that happened by. But, Paranormal investigators, we have to put our pictures on Facebook to look like we've actually done something. But
actually, for Bray Road, that's probably pretty normal.
Yeah, probably. You see pictures all the time. Yeah, I don't pick up anything, even if there's something there to pick up. Maybe we could. I want to get to your experience on Monster Quest, but you and I were talking off air a little bit about you had kind of an idea of why some people see things and others don't, and this goes right to my heart because, as everybody knows, I can barely get through two sentences without mentioning John Keel, and he had sort of an idea that certain people were tuned in. He hypothesized something like the super spectrum, and that certain people had certain latent psychic abilities and were more apt to see and experience these things, and not just one thing, but a lot of people would be repeaters. So what were you thinking about as far as why it is that some people can actually see and experience these things and others don't?
Sure. I'm not like mega college educated. I'm not a physicist or anything. A long time ago, I came up with this theory that people who I refer to as true Forteans, people who experience paranormal activity on a regular basis of all kinds, just straight across the board. They see UFOs, they see cryptids, they see ghosts, just little people, everything. Lake monsters. I'm rattling off all the things I've seen here.
We're going to try and get to some of those too, because I know you're quite an experiencer, but go ahead.
The people who experience these things on a regular basis, it's my theory that their biorhythms vibrate faster than people who don't see anything at all. And a perfect example would be on a normal daily basis, if my husband and I are driving down the freeway, I'll be like, oh, look at Coyote. And 100 other cars go right past it and don't see it. Yet I can see it. Or, ooh, check out that vulture up in that tree with its wings spread. How many other people saw that vulture and you're on the freeway and cars are shooting past it? I saw a bear in Pennsylvania on the side of the road the same way. Probably very few people on the freeway saw it because they're looking at the road or what have you. That's an example of an animal that normally people wouldn't see. Out of place animals, people see them too. Whether they see an ocean bird inland or a kangaroo in Milwaukee County, for instance. Milwaukee is known for its kangaroo sightings.
Yeah, I was just going to say, people see kangaroos all over the place. Yeah,
they do.
Out of place. Yes, go ahead.
They do. I suspect people keep kangaroos as pets, and they find out that they don't make good pets, and they let them go. That's what I think.
That's probably true.
I think that it's like, for instance, women on their periods who all live together, they all sync up and they all have their periods at the same time. I suspect people who vibrate their biorhythms at a faster speed, when they hang out with people who have slow biorhythms vibrating, they can cause that other person's vibration to increase, and suddenly that person can see things where they never did before. And that's happened with two people that I've lived with.
So you say if I start hanging out with you guys more, I'm going to start experiencing things.
Yes.
Quite possibly, yes.
maybe I'll stay home. just to be safe,
Chicken.
Yes. Well, some of us that don't have these experiences think that we might like to have them, and I suppose when we do get them, we think, why did I ask for that?
Yes.
It's been my experience that you really grow tired quickly of being startled all the time. I'm not scared of things per se, but when you walk from the kitchen into the hallway and there's a man standing in front of you in your bathroom door brushing his teeth, he's looking at you, you're looking at him, and you suddenly make monkey sounds, and then he disappears. You get tired of being startled all the time.
So apparently,
I wasn't scared.
Apparently, that wasn't your significant other brushing his teeth.
No, he was watching television in the room next to us.
Okay.
And it's not the first time that has happened to me, where I've looked at a ghost or whatever. A ghost looks at me just equally as surprised as I am.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've told the story before about a friend of mine who had a similar kind of experience in a library where he was doing some research, quite an old library in the UK, and suddenly looked up and a man dressed in what he described as very much old-fashioned clothing, sort of Victorian style, looked very startled at my friend, who was obviously dressed in modern clothing, and my friend looked back at him equally as startled, and each had the kind of expression of, what are you doing here? Who are you? Where you come from? And the guy then, this other chap sort of turned away and went down to another aisle of the bookcase of the library, and but my friend checked, there was no one else there. He checked with the librarian, there was no one else in the area. It was just him doing his research. So it was like a two-way paranormal experience. My friend was effectively seeing someone from the past, and the other person was then seeing somebody obviously from the future, as my friend was sitting there doing his research. So it is that you do get that two-way experience sometimes, where you're not just the seer, you're the being seen as well. But a lot of what you were saying there about people having a particular sort of ability, if you like, or experiences that mean they start to see stuff and then see more and more, I very much agree with that kind of theory myself. I've sort of developed a similar theory along a similar line, where people who have had unusual experiences when they were younger, whether it's kind of something's happened to them or they've been out and something strange has occurred. But once it happens once, it seems to happen multiple times. But some people have had particular experiences that have involved sort of being ill and then sort of being quite close to dying, and then suddenly coming out of that and having strange experiences and abilities. Again, a friend of mine many years ago, part of a ghost investigation team I used to run, he wasn't psychic or anything until he had a car crash and received quite a nasty blow to the head, a bit of a head injury. And after that, very strange things started to happen to him. He was a salesman. He had no interest in the paranormal, supernatural whatsoever until after his car crash. And he said it wasn't seriously ill or anything, but he was quite bad head trauma, and it was had to have a minor operation to release some pressure on the brain. And it seemed ever since that head injury, he seemed to become psychic and was picking up all sorts of strange things that we'd never even noticed before. And other people I know who've had emotional difficulties, if you like, who've suffered with anxiety or depression in earlier years, have then come out of that perfectly fine, but then more aware of strange things around them. They're more in touch with that kind of level of awareness. And you talk about sort of vibrations. I think there's certainly something to that as well, where the mind is working. You spend enough time with people of a similar mindset, things do start to happen around you. Again, as I've said to Steve before, my old days of working for a paranormal investigation company, the public used to come along to. If the group that was there, the public who'd paid to be there, were really up for the excitement of the night and wanted to get involved, stuff happened. Things would occur. If they were very much lethargic and not that interested, and the night used to be very quiet, very little would happen. Now, they're not making these things happen, they're not making them up, but their enthusiasm, their energy, if you like, contributed to what was happening around them and kind of fed into that and made the evening much more interesting. And if you go to the same location with different people, you get a very different experience depending on the nature of the people that are involved. So yeah, I definitely agree that the more you're involved in this, the more you do begin to experience things and see stuff. So why Steve's not seeing anything is a bit of a mystery, really.
I don't know. He goes to all these weird places. I don't know why he doesn't see anything.
I know, and I hang out with all these weird people, too. But see, the thing is, what you guys don't know is that all my life, since I was a little kid, I'm always bashing my head or bumping my head. I even had a concussion once, and it hasn't helped me at all. But just for a moment, I want to remind everybody that you are listening to The High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And Kim, let's talk about you had a really interesting experience and a bit painful experience, as I recall, on Monster Quest when they put you through the ropes and the hoops to try and see if you were making the story up or if it's something that really happened.
Yes.
And so, take us through that.
Okay. Let's see. I did the show Monster Quest, and part of my doing that show was a lie detector test and hypnosis. And I was game. I was like, sure, let's do it. Now, the hypnosis was to see if I could recall what this creature's bottom feet look like. I don't remember seeing its legs or feet. I was just glued to the upper body, the upper portion, having never seen anything like that before. And, of course, the lie detector test, they put the cuffs on your arms, and it's like almost like a blood pressure cuff, and one on each arm. And then they have these little things that, if I recall correctly, they put them on the tips of your fingers, and you're hooked up to this machine that monitors what you're saying, and they ask you all kinds of questions. Now, there was a thing around my chest too, I think, to regulate my to test breathing and your heart and stuff. Oh, there was all kinds of tubes and wires sticking out of me. Anyhow, the first thing that the man said was, the man doing the lie detector test, he said, well, I'm not going to be able to do this if you can't breathe right. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you're not breathing right. And I said, well, how am I supposed to be breathing? He said, well, breathe like a normal person. And I said, okay, I have sinus problems real bad, chronic sinus disorder. I have a deviated septum, and I have hypothyroidism. All three of those things make me breathe a little differently than how a regular normal person with none of those things breathes. And he says, fine, okay, we'll get around it. Okay. So he puts these cuffs on my arms. He asks me a whole bunch of questions. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And he said, what do you mean? And I'm like, these cuffs hurt. And he said, well, just a little bit longer. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this hurts. This is really, really painful to my arms. I don't like this. Do you have all the information you need? Get these cuffs off me now. And it seems to me like it was a half an hour or 40 minutes. Now imagine having your blood pressure taken for a half an hour or 40 minutes.
Oh, no thanks.
Right. It sucked.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll skip ahead a little bit, and now I'm being hypnotized. And I can go under hypnosis like nobody's business. Like 1, 2, 3, bam, I'm hypnotized. They could probably get me to balk like a chicken. Usually I fall asleep, but I go under real easily. And the guy asked me, did I remember seeing the feet on this creature? And asked me, do I remember the occasion and all this stuff? And I said, no, I don't recall seeing the feet. And he said, well, tell me what you do remember. And surprisingly, I said, my mother turns around and yells at me and says, get in the house now. And I just looked at her, and she looked really angry and was pointing at the door, and I started crying. And I could have gone my whole life without remembering any of that. I really could have. It was very disturbing to me. My mother was trying to protect me and yelling at me to get into the house, and I didn't have any memory of that at all. And he asked me if I remembered what the creature looked like, and as I was describing it, and I made the Monster Quest crew promise not to use this footage in Monster Quest, and they didn't, and I was very thankful. They zoomed in on me as I was describing what the creature looked like, and I was making little claw hands, and I was like going, like making a growly face and showing my teeth and stuff. God. I know, right? I'm like so thankful that they would have used it on the commercial for like 15 years. Every time it was rerun, it would have been me like, My 3-year-old nephew at the time, he was 3, he went to his mother and he went, Mommy, Auntie Kim's on TV. And she said, yeah, right. He said, no, really, Auntie Kim's on TV. And my sister-in-law went and looked at the TV and rewound it. And sure enough, it was a commercial for Monster Quest. And it was me going, he's got great big fangs like this. For the rest of my life, people are being like making fang faces at me. He's got great big fangs like this. So I'm glad that they didn't use me under hypnosis, making claws and snarly faces.
But they did pull things out of you that you didn't remember initially.
They did. They definitely did. And my mother yelling at me to get into the house was very traumatic for me, but I did not remember the feet.
One other thing about the dog man, then maybe we'll move on. It's very interesting. Linda's second book, Hunting the American Werewolf, about the dog man.
Can I just cut in for a second?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Super question, Kim. Did you speak to your mother afterwards and confirm that she did actually do that and say that to you?
No.
Is that something you think your mom would never want to talk about again?
My mother died 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
You never had a chance.
Mom, can you tell me about it?
Well, that answers that question.
Yeah,
Andy. Andy, we'll just cut this out of the show, right? You can do that.
Fair enough.
No, leave it in. It's fine.
So we don't look too dumb here. Okay. Well, everybody will know this is we're not doing a script here, obviously.
No, definitely not.
Well, I'm very, very sorry to hear that, because it would have been interesting to see what she had remembered. And of course, again, she may not have wanted to ever visit that day again. But in Hunting the American Werewolf, Linda Godfrey talks about how Linda has come to the conclusion, I don't want to speak for her, that I think she has shied away a bit from these things being strictly flesh and blood. There always seems to be some kind of paranormal trappings to these things. But she found that I think it was let's see, in Eisenberg's Indian Mounds of Wisconsin. She was checking out some of the effigy mounds, and most notably the panther mounds and the water spirit mounds. And the water spirit mounds, when you look at these mounds, the panther mounds, they look, of course, they're very simple. You kind of see the head and the feet and a short tail. The water spirit mounds look similar to that, but they have a very long, pointed tail. But she did an overlay of cluster maps of dogman sightings, and they matched up almost perfectly to these mounds. And there is various lore that these dogmen are there to protect the mounds in various traditions. So that's very interesting. That gets into John Keel too, that wondered, what came first, the strange lights over the mounds, or did the people build the mounds, and because of their powerful consciousness, did they create the lights? But,
interesting you should say that.
Okay.
I have been reading about the mounds, Indian mounds that used to be all over Milwaukee County. And there are mounds left in Milwaukee in Lake Park, that's along Lake Michigan's shoreline on the east side of Milwaukee. But there used to be mounds all over Milwaukee, and of course, they were torn down or dug out, and buildings were built on them. However, I know where there are two mounds, and they are both very close to rivers, if not on rivers, and they are not marked. They are kept up, they are mowed, and it makes you wonder. And I'm in between, four rivers. I live blocks away from where that sighting took place on 50th and Wright. And we are definitely in between four rivers. And if the rivers all had Native American mounds on them, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's not much of a stretch if there is a connection that your encounter
not at all.
was. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yes.
Tell us about my favorite topic. Tell us about meeting John Keel.
Oh,
and of course, John Keel, for those few that don't know, is the Fortean and author of the Mothman Prophecies, and I call him the mentor I never knew. But go ahead.
I went to Fort Fest. It was, I don't remember what year it was. It was 96 or 98 or something. It was in the late 90s, and I was very, very, very excited to go to Fort Fest. I've been a member of Info forever and ever and ever, the International Fortean Organization, since I was at least 20.
And I used to subscribe to their magazine, but go ahead.
Oh, sure. And I'd written a few articles for Info magazine as well and got them published by Info.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I went to Fort Fest, and I had a wonderful opportunity to share a dinner table at Fort Fest with John Keel. And we chatted while we were eating, chatted about a book he had been working on. I don't know if he ever got it published, that had a section about animals that are learn how to talk other than birds, cats, dogs, horses, whatever. We talked about the Men in Black. I asked him if he felt they were aliens or if he felt that they were government agents. And he actually told me he felt they were government agents of some kind, which I always thought was interesting, that they weren't from the UFOs. The following evening, I was sitting in the audience, and there was a question answer panel of people who were guests at Fort Fest, all the speakers. And one of the guests, I don't recall who anymore, couldn't be there. He had to leave early. And Rory Nugent was sitting on the panel, and John Keel and a number of other people.
Rory Nugent, I don't know the name. Do you know?
He was an investigator. He wrote a book called, what was it called? In Search of the Legendary Pink Duck or something. It was,
okay.
The book was fabulous, and hearing him talk was fabulous.
Okay.
Anyhow, he sat on the panel as well. He went in search of a pink duck in Africa that was supposedly extinct.
Yeah, I've heard of him, actually. Yes, I remember heard of him.
Yes. And a man stood up with the microphone and said, well, one of our guest speakers is not able to be here this evening. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to take his place? And boom, my hand shoots up. I don't think in a million years they're going to choose me. And he said in the microphone, Kim Poeppey from Milwaukee, come on up to the stage. Not only did he choose me, but he knew who I was. My head was like huge. I sat next to John. I sat next to John Keel on the panel, and we had a mighty discussion for hours. 3 hours, 4 hours, I don't even know. And one by one, the panelists were excusing themselves to go to bed. And finally, John Keel around 11 o'clock said, "I'm exhausted. Would you all excuse me? It's been a lovely evening. Good night." And he left. By 1 o'clock in the morning, I was the only person left on stage, and I still had a huge audience. I had the microphone. I was doing like my stand-up routine, but it was paranormal. And the manager of the hotel walked up to us and took the microphone away from me and covered it with his hand. And he said, "I need to send my employees home for the evening. Can we end this now?" And I took the microphone and I said, "They need to close down the hall. If anyone wants to continue the conversation, join me out in the foyer." And half of the people went to bed, and half of them, maybe like 30 people, joined me in the foyer, and we continued the discussion till, I don't know, 3 a.m. or something. It was really fun. I felt like I was in my mode with like-minded people who didn't think you were crazy, for all the weird things that you have seen. It felt good.
Yeah, and that's really important too.
Yes.
And to hang out with John Keel, I never had a chance to meet him, so
he was like somebody's loving, squishy grandpa. He was just so kind and so modest, and
Kim,
he was just a wonderful guy.
Kim, that's how I think of Steve. That's how I think of Steve.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm an old curmudgeon, and don't forget it.
I've met Steve and had dinner with him on several occasions. Yeah, he's a little squishy.
She's talking about the cranium, I think, but we will move on. I want to talk a little bit about. I want to get to after this. I want to get to some of your excursions with Linda into top secret double probation paranormal hotspots that we can't give the location. But can you just briefly talk a little bit about your investigations with Allison into the Chicago Mothman?
Sure. Allison Jorlin, I can never say her last name correctly. Say it for me, Steve.
That's right, Jorlin, right?
Jorlin.
Yes.
Allison Jorlin and I we live an hour and 45 minutes from Chicago downtown proper. And Allison asked if I wanted to join her to check out some of the sighting spots in Chicago. And would I hold the camera while she did her YouTube program for it? And I said, sure, I'd love to.
And of course, what had been happening was a lot of people were, well, at least these reports were coming in of some kind of winged-like creatures that they were dubbing the Chicago Mothman, and had been going on for some time. Go ahead.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And we had investigated a bunch of the places that were really close to Lake Michigan, in downtown Chicago, close to Lake Michigan. Also close to the Chicago Zoo, which is right on the lake shores of Lake Michigan. I think Allison might have asked me along because when I'm with her, when we're together, things happen. Same thing. When I'm with Linda, things happen. And we talked to a bunch of people. I'm not shy. I'll stop anybody and ask them, hey, have you seen anything weird, anything flying, anything big? A lot of people admitted, yes, they have great horned owls. They have seen sand cranes. They've seen great blue herons. The Chicago Zoo right on the lake shores has a ginormous pond the size of a small lake. And they've got white egrets and herons and just every water bird you can think of. And we talked to a fellow who said he used to live part-time near the zoo in the woods there, and he was homeless, and he had a tent, and he said sure enough you would see vultures land, you would see owls at night. While we were there, while I was talking to Allison and videotaping her, a very, very large insect that I never saw before this zoomed. It was like coming right for me, and I'm like, it's coming right for me, and I made a run for it. and it was a cicada killer wasp, and it was easily the size of your thumb. This thing was a monster, and it had a cicada, and it was like stabbing it with its stinger. It was like, and the cicada's going, trying to get away, and it's dragging it across the ground at us. And I got lots of pictures of it. We got pictures of hawks and turkey vultures.
Just a second, Kim. So you're suggesting that if I start hanging around with you guys, I'm going to witness killer bugs attacking other bugs and that kind of thing?
Oh, no.
Anything's possible, Steve.
But anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Anyhow, while we were talking to two ladies who spend a lot of time in the park there, and we asked them if they ever saw any large birds, and they both said yes. A monarch butterfly flew through us and came up to one lady and landed on a pendant that was on her chest. And her friend started crying a little, and she had said, this is really important right now. And Allison and I were like, oh, okay. And she said, my friend's son had passed away last year, and she had his ashes made into this pendant that she's wearing around her neck. And the butterfly landed right on it.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So both ladies were verklempt. The one lady was crying. Alice and I were like getting verklempt. It was an emotional moment. It was a really interesting day. At one point towards the end of the day, after investigating a beach on Lake Michigan where someone had seen a flying something or other fly over the beach and over the lake, a number of fire trucks and rescue crews shot past us. And up ahead about 2 blocks as we got closer, we came to realize that a boy had drowned and gone missing in Lake Michigan. And there was a lot of people who were standing and watching the rescue crews. There were rescue boats. There were helicopters. It was very unsettling and sad. So we decided to get back to the car, which we had left in a parking complex. And to get over to the other side, underneath the busy highway, we had to cut through a tunnel that went underground. And in this tunnel, there's dressing rooms, there's locker rooms, there's bathrooms, and there's a million bajillion spiders. Not just a couple of spiders, not just little spiders, but every single inch of this tunnel, which was a half a block long, was covered in big spiders, and they were all moving, and they were all coming down on webs. And I thought I had hit record on my camera, and I only hit record when I thought I was turning it off on the way out, and I went, I got this recorded. Nope, too many spiders for me. Nope. And then I pressed stop. It was just so funny. We didn't see any spiders on the video. We just got me saying that, and I pressed stop. My conclusion specifically was that people were seeing animals. In this day and age, animals are moving back into the cities. They're moving along the lake shore. There's less pesticides. There's more insects. There's more birds. There's big birds. There's a giant pond. They're seeing animals that are known, but they don't know them. These might be people who work in an office all day, and all they ever do is go from the subway to their apartment, to their office, to the subway, to their apartment. Yeah, they don't watch Animal Planet. They don't go to the zoo. But they don't see them.
And I know also that Allison went to some of the spots, and some of the reports would describe the surroundings, and the surroundings didn't quite match up. Like if you're going to tell a tale, sometimes you don't think about all the detail you need. And also, I've heard from some investigators, and I can't prove this, that some of the sightings that came in initially were a few of them were from the same IP address, pretending to be from different places. So
that's what I heard. Yes,
it did cast a bit of doubt on it. But I would love to move on. I know that Linda has talked about a paranormal hotspot. I think it's in Wisconsin somewhere, but like I say, this is a top secret, double secret probation.
Correct.
And that if you were to tell Andy and I, you'd have to kill us, right?
I don't have it in me to kill anybody, but I would threaten you real good.
We might just get beat up a little bit. But you went. I know that you'll have to fill in the parts here. I don't remember, but I know you've been to an area that I think people might have seen Bigfoots. I don't know. I know one time you guys were was it pelted with apples?
Correct.
That
I don't think
you couldn't determine the origin, which doesn't, it could have been some snotty kids. But in when you talk here, tell us about that strange anomaly you got on camera as well.
Sure. Linda and her friend and I went on an ongoing investigation to an area here in Wisconsin where Linda and her friend, and I can't remember the lady's name, I'm sorry, they had experienced wood knocks and howling, Bigfoot type anomalies while they have been there on an investigation. I honestly don't know how they found this spot. If they told me, I don't recall, but I went along, and it's a public place. There were lots and lots of bicyclers, mountain bikers with gear on, and they'd be like passing on your left, shoot, and they go flying past, shoot, shoot, shoot. Now I go in open-minded, but I'm like, come on, there are so many people here. There is no way that there could be a Bigfoot and not be seen by all these bicyclers, all these hikers, people walking their dogs, And it was in the woods. Don't get me wrong. It was in the woods, and it's not an easy hike. It was some, hilly areas and rocky areas. So we're standing in front of this young patch of woods, and Linda and her friend are going to offer a Bigfoot some bread. They brought some grapes. They brought some peanuts, and the first thing they do, they go to dig in their bag, and her friend pulls out this loaf of Italian bread and says, "Oh, Bigfoot, would you like some delicious Italian bread?" And they break it off and they start tossing it in the woods. And I'm giggling to myself, going, "Yeah, right. Like Bigfoot knows what the word delicious means." And I'm a naysayer at this point. And I think it's kind of silly because there's so many people. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like there were tons of people, but like every 10 or 15 minutes, a bicycle would go shooting past us. And you would hear the bicycle coming towards you before you saw him. You'd hear the wheels in the dirt. You hear the gears shifting. You hear this person clearing his throat or coughing or whatever. And they go and they throw Bigfoot the bread. And I'm watching the woods in front of me as they toss some bread, and they're digging in their bag, and they toss them some grapes or whatever. And I see with my own eyeballs a crab apple or something small, a small apple like that, materialize about 15, 20 feet in front of me from out of nowhere and come towards us as if you were to toss it underhanded, so it would go in a relatively straight line about 2 feet off the ground. It's not like they threw it like a baseball. It's like it was tossed underhandedly. And it came at us, and the girls didn't see it until right before it hit the trail next to us, and it rolled a little bit. And I lost it. I full on lost it. I was like, "Oh my God, did you guys see that?" I was flipping out. I was so excited. And Linda was very calm at this point. She turns on her video and she goes, "Kim, would you please pick up that apple?" Linda, oh my God, did you see it materialize? Oh man. So I'm handing her this apple.
Andy, I know Linda, and I can see her do that, being very chilled out and asking Kim to pick up the apple. Go ahead, Kim.
Funny. I was losing it. And she and her friend are like, "Kim, would you like to offer the Bigfoot some grapes or some peanuts?" "Here, have some grapes. Here, have some peanuts. Oh my God, you guys, how are you not flipping out? How did you not see that?" Okay, so we discussed it for a moment, and we determined that anyone could have heard us had they been on the other sides of this small patch of young woods. That I was going to walk to the edge and see if another trail connected, if it went behind this patch of woods, and they would come up to that fork in the roads if there was one, and walk back to where we had seen it. And we would Marco Polo the whole way until I really couldn't hear them anymore. And then I would stop. Okay, so we do this. There was a trail. It wasn't a regular trail. It was kind of like a deer animal trail, and it got smaller, narrower, and more weedy as it went on. And when I really couldn't hear Linda so good anymore saying Marco Polo, I stopped. Not only because I couldn't hear so good, but because the trail had disappeared and it was just weeds. And the first thing that pops into my head is, I really don't want Lyme disease. I don't want a tick. I'm going to take a picture of the trail and show the girls that, yes, in fact, there was a trail. It did end. It didn't go anywhere. Nobody was on it. And I turn around and go back. Okay, so I take out my camera. I shoot a picture of the weeds, and I head back to Linda and her friend and show them the picture. I didn't show them picture. That's right. I didn't show them. I didn't think about it. And we walked a ways. I just want
to stop you for a minute. You guys were actually doing what an investigator should do, rather than merely, some people might have written it up and said, yes, a Bigfoot threw apples at us. You actually went and think, well, what could have happened, and then you went and investigated it. But tell us more about the photograph.
Sure. Linda and her friend and I walked for a little bit longer. We heard some really strange sounds from the forest, as if you were to take a big boulder, like a 2 foot by 2 foot rock, and you were to push it down a hill and it would bash into a whole bunch of other rocks. We heard this on numerous occasions. After seeing the bicycles come down the trails with people on them, we determined that we did not hear a bicycle. We heard answers to our wood knocks, other wood knocks. It was what we considered a very successful investigation. Linda's friend had a bad knee or something, so we decided to call it a day and head back. And that was like on a Tuesday. That weekend, my husband and I went to Michigan Paracon in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And while we were there, we were helping our friend Bob Murch with the Ouija board booth. And I went to the traveling haunted museum, and I wanted to take a few pictures, and I especially wanted a photo of Billy, the African haunted statue. And it's like a creepy statue carved of wood. I believe it's African in origin, but I'm not sure. And the thing is, you're supposed to ask it if you can take its picture and leave it something. Leave it a little, a bribe. Can I take your picture? Here's a little thing, like a gift. And I went up to it and I said, of course, I'm talking to an inanimate object. Billy, is it okay if I take a picture of the booth? Not you in particular, but the whole booth. Here's a nickel. All I had on me was a nickel. So I left it a nickel. It was something. I don't know what Billy the statue is going to do with a nickel or American currency, but that's all I had. So I took a bunch of pictures. And I walked around and I took pictures of everybody. I had my pictures taken with people all on my cell phone. And I get back to the Ouija board booth and I see my husband, Steve, and he said, what'd you do? And I said, I went around and took a bunch of pictures. And I went to show him, and my phone was dead. And not only was my phone dead, it was erased, gone. It didn't work. We couldn't take any. There was nothing. It was completely erased. And I was to the point of tears. I was thinking I had like a million photos and phone contacts and emails on this phone, right? It's like your livelihood nowadays. And I'm trying really hard not to think about it. And I take it and I put it in my purse and I leave it alone and forget it. And I go around with my regular camera and I shoot all the photos again. Michigan Paracon is over. We're heading back to Wisconsin because we drove, and we get to Peshigo, Wisconsin. And a lot of people who are familiar with Wisconsin know that at the same time the Chicago fire occurred, I think it was like 1908 or something, or 1898. I don't remember. The Peshigo fire occurred on the same exact day. Speculation is a meteorite flew over and dropped pieces here and there and caused fires. Who knows? while we're at the Peshtigo Fire Museum, I say to the lady who's giving us a tour and my husband, do you guys smell that? I smell smoke. And she goes, oh, that's not even funny. And I'm like, no, I do. I smell smoke. And neither one of them smelled it. I think it's my imagination, or I smell a wood burning fire or something, whatever. We get through it. We get the museum closes. My husband and I get out into the cemetery, and we're visiting a mass grave of 30 people who died in the Peshtigo fire. If you don't know anything about the Peshtigo fire, a lot of the Upper Peninsula of Wisconsin and Michigan burned to the ground. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people died.
That actually went all over the U.S. And the fires, there was a strange character of the fires that didn't. It was like self-igniting sometimes. It was very, very bizarre.
The air itself was on fire.
But I want you to keep on this thread. But are we going to get to that strange anomaly you got? Oh, okay.
It's getting to it.
Okay. I was worried. I was worried we were off on another pathway. We'd never get there.
No. All my stories are connected.
That's all right.
So we're in the cemetery. We're visiting this mass grave, and my husband smells smoke strong, and now I can smell it. Okay, we get home. We're researching it, and sure enough, the Peshtigo Fire Museum is haunted by the scent of random smoke. Okay, so we both experienced it. While we're home, while we're sitting here, and my husband is putting all my photos into the computer from my camera. That day before he did that, he took my cell phone to the kiosk at the mall, and he showed me, said, it just stopped working. There's nothing. And the guy at the kiosk said, what's your code? And my husband said, what code? And he said, the code that you need to get through all 3 firewalls to erase your phone. And my husband says, we don't know it. We don't know what happened. It just happened on its own. And the guy said, lucky you, because it didn't get through the 4th firewall, we're able to retrieve all the information on the phone. Very suspicious.
So
seeing that my phone...
Something seemed to have happened that wiped out a lot of your pictures.
Visiting Billy the Haunted African statue at Michigan Paracon, and Billy killed my phone. I am convinced of that. Okay, that's neither here nor there. The husband has my cell phone all fixed. He's got my camera. He's putting the pictures into the computer, and I'm going through them, and he goes to bed. His bedroom's on another floor because I don't sleep good. So I'm sitting in bed. It's maybe 10 o'clock at night. I'm going through photos. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot all about my trip with Linda on the investigation to find Bigfoot. And I'm going through photos, and I get to that trail that ended in weeds. And I took a picture to show the girls. Oh, my God, I've got something. I stop what I'm doing. I run upstairs. I'm like, oh, my God, husband, I found something. I got something on film. His mouth is open. We both run down the stairs. We sat in bed for a couple of hours and looking at this photo and speculated the what ifs. What I have a photo of is a black hole floating like 3 feet off the ground.
And it's kind of, isn't it more like a rip or a tear, as I recall it? It's not like a perfect hole? Or am I...
Yeah, it's sort of ovalish. And
okay.
the light from everything is going into the hole around the edges. It's like falling into it. Now we contemplated, what is this hole? And we all concluded, including Linda after she had seen it, that this was some sort of a dimensional portal, went to another place, went to another time. And we concluded, based on this apple materializing in front of me and flying towards me, that, and I believe this 100%, that a Bigfoot, whatever it is, can go through dimensions, our dimension to his dimension, or whatever you want to call it, through this hole, through this doorway, this window, whatever it is. Now, I laid in bed long after my husband went to bed, and I thought, what if? What if I would have kept walking? What if I would have went through this hole? Was there air there? Was there food? Was there water? Were there a whole bunch of Bigfoot to pummel me to death? Were there dinosaurs?
Listen, Kim,
I didn't know.
You would have been in the next. You would have been in the next Missing 411 book, and we'd be reading about you.
I just watched that a little while before I talked to you. His new show about the hunters.
And so did Andy and I. And I was so blown. I had it forever here. I just hadn't watched it yet. And I thought, okay, we got a few, hunters missing. And then it gets to he talks about Ron Morgan.
I didn't see the end.
Oh,
don't ruin the end for me. I didn't see it.
The end is a double. It's a double whammy. It's
okay, cool.
Awesome. Okay, I won't say anymore.
I missed the half hour because I turned it off.
Oh, it is. It will. If you
probably, yes, that's some of the best stuff. I mean, one of the funny things I thought with the program was that Dave Politis is sort of saying, I'm not going to put theories out what I think is going on, but the more it goes and the stranger they get, the more it's going in our kind of direction of maybe that's what he's trying to say is going on with this stuff. But won't say any more than that. But yes, you've got to watch the end, definitely.
When David talked about that one hunter who was 38 years old, they found his pack, they found his shoes, they found his water. It seemed to me that this person was walking in and out of doorways or windows.
Yeah, that's exactly
from one dimension into another dimension into our dimension. And
exactly
he was
especially the way his stuff was left. I won't talk about it, but the way his stuff was just sort of left sitting, and the flask sitting on a rock. It's like, that just doesn't make sense. All that time later, that close to the farmland, and yet it was never seen before, and this is months later, and it's like it's just left there. You do find yourself wandering into that thought as if he's somehow sort of skipping through time almost, suddenly coming in and out of ordinary reality and finding himself suddenly moved forward in time. That's just bizarre. It really is. But let's not get too much into that.
Wherever that man is, time is different because several months go by in our time, yet he's got his little drink here and his food was in his backpack untouched. It makes you think he was so close to that house and he didn't see it. How come he couldn't see it? Because where he was at, that house didn't exist.
Yes, there are so many anomalies like that. And the ones that are the most fascinating to me are the ones that are found 3 days or a week later, but they can barely enunciate what happened to them, if at all. And something, we're going to have to end it pretty soon, but another thing that's very interesting, and even David Politis has recognized this, if you look back at fairy lore, the things that people were concerned about in their encounters with the fairy, a lot of that, I won't say explains, but parallels many of these strange cases. It's just fascinating.
Interesting you should say that because I have one more story for you.
Okay.
I was living in this house that I'm living in now, but I was living upstairs and I was watching television. My chair was clear across the living room from the entertainment center. I thought I saw, and I was home alone, I thought I saw a little mouse run across the top of the entertainment center and fall down the side and shoot under a bookcase. And the bookcase had a scalloped front and a hollow base, and you could kind of like look under it. I'm like, I'm going to go see the little mouse, right? And yeah, of course, I'll go see the mouse instead of being Ika Mouse. So I walk across the room, the length of a couch, and I get on my hands and knees and I look under the bookcase expecting to see a mouse look back at me. What I saw were eyeballs way too big for the little thing that fell off the entertainment center. And they were red. They were red eyeballs, and they were, I don't even know. Anyhow, it freaked me out so bad, and I don't know how I did this. I jumped straight up in the air, the length of the couch, and landed back in the chair backwards. And honest to God, and I became very relaxed. And I sat in the chair all relaxed, and I don't know how much time passed, 15 minutes, a half an hour. And then I came to, and I was like, oh, holy shit, what just happened? And I went and I looked, and no little mouse. And I was so confused and befuddled. And I told my ex at the time what happened. And he said, funny you should say that. What are the chances that I would see an albino bat in the house? And it was like winter, right? And I said, well, slim, but not an impossibility. If for some reason the bat woke up and it happened to be an albino in a house, I suppose. He goes, well, what about a really big white moth? I'm like, what did you see? He saw, and he was walking through the dining room, and our bedroom door was in the dining room, and he saw something catch his eye, and it fluttered, and it stopped in front of his face, about 1.5 feet. And he looked right at it. It had wings. It had a humanish face. It was white. It appeared to have arms and legs. And while his mind was trying to focus on what he was looking at, it shot in the blink of an eye through the bedroom door. He looked in, and it had completely disappeared.
Wow. There are so many instances like that where people will see things that don't even fit a paranormal category. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just an oddity. But Kim,
just plain weird.
Yes. Before I thank you for a great hour, actually a little over hour, I'm not going to thank you yet because I have to say one thing. When you watch the end of David Paulides' Missing 411 Hunters, the DVD, don't bother wearing any socks because they will be knocked off.
Well, I'm not wearing any socks. So.
Okay, all right. I'm really you'll be able to watch it. Okay.
Oh,
listen,
good.
Kim, this has been an absolutely fabulous hour. I knew it would be. I mean, I've seen you speak, and we're friends, and it's always a good time. So, as long as I keep steaming and have a show, I would love to have you come back sometime.
Oh, I would love to be back. We can talk about how you stepped on a frog in Point Pleasant.
That's a bit of an exaggeration, Andy, but we will save that. We'll save that for part 2. And also, Andy, I really appreciate the fact that you've been able to join me again.
That's great.
I'm separated. We're separated by 5 hours. You and Kim are separated by 6 hours. But somehow, through the magic of cyberspace, we made it work.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Okay, now everybody, stay there a minute because I have a few more things to say, but I'm going to do my phenomenal closeout. And Kim, you're just going to be so impressed when you hear this. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for having me, guys.
Okay, but just stay there. We're going to be talking for a minute. Okay. And I also want to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson. They, of course, are our fearless leaders here at the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I also want to thank Andy again because not only is he my occasional co-host, he is my producer. And without his efforts, I would just be talking to myself into cyberspace. I also want to thank Brian Zeller, who created the original music for the show. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangers Factor, a displaced Yank here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.